"I've forgotten what it feels like to be loved," she said, and the words did not shake, because she had been carrying them for a long time and had learned how to set them down gently. The lamp guttered. A moth turned in the yellow light above the porch. Outside, the September wind moved through the cottonwoods along the creek at the back of the property, and the leaves made the small, dry sound of coins in a jar. Sarah Kincaid was 34 years old. She stood 5 feet 6 inches in her boots. Her hair was dark chestnut, threaded now with the first fine strands of gray at the temples, and she wore it in a braid pinned close to her skull because there was no one anymore to see it loose. Her eyes were gray with a ring of green near the pupil, the color of the creek in April light. She had a straight nose, a wide mouth that had once smiled easily, and a small, faded scar on the underside of her jaw from a fall when she was 11. She stood with her weight even on both feet the way a person stands who has been alone with animals a long time. Her dress that evening was gray wool, high at the throat, long in the sleeve, buttoned from collar to wrist, and the hem brushed the porch boards when she walked. A knitted shawl the color of oatmeal hung across her shoulders. Ethan Calloway was 36 years old. He stood 6 feet even. His hair was the color of wet straw, and he wore it cut short beneath a dark brown hat that had gone soft at the crown from weather. His eyes were a plain, steady blue. He had a jaw shaved that morning and a small nick under his ear where the razor had caught. He wore a canvas coat the color of oiled wood, a chambray shirt buttoned to the collar, denim trousers, and boots that had walked more country than most men would in a lifetime. He carried himself the way a man does when he has learned that words are a currency to be spent carefully, and he had learned that lesson in a hard place, and he had not forgotten it. The Kincaid place sat 6 miles east of Durango, in a bend of the San Juan foothills where the light in the evening came in long and gold and low across the hay meadow. Sarah's husband, Thomas, had died 2 years and 4 months before, in the march of a hard winter, from a fever that took him in 11 days. He had been 39. He had left her the house he had built with his own hands, 160 acres of grazing land, 42 head of cattle, a good bay mare named June, a dog named Pilot who slept now on the boards by her door, and a silence she had not known could weigh so much. There had been no children. There had been talk of children once, and the talk had been sweet and slow, and then Thomas had gotten sick, and after that there had been no more talk of anything sweet at all. Ethan had come to the Kincaid place on the last Tuesday of August. He had drifted down from Wyoming after his brother's death in June, riding a good sorrel gelding named Ash, carrying a saddle and a bedroll and a folded letter from a man in Pueblo who had said the widow Kincaid was looking for a hand to help her get through fall gather. He had knocked at the door and taken off his hat and said his name and said he could ride, rope, brand, mend fence, cut hay, and shoe a horse if the shoes were pre-cut, and Sarah had looked at him a long moment on the porch and had said, "All right, $2 a day and the bunkhouse." And he had said, "Yes, ma'am." And that had been the whole of their first conversation. That had been 4 weeks ago. Now it was the last Thursday in September, and the aspens up on the ridge had gone the color of struck matches, and Sarah Kincaid stood on her porch in the gray wool dress with the lamp beside her, and she had said the words she had not planned to say, and Ethan Calloway had stopped with one boot on the top step and one hand on the porch post, and the moth had turned in the light above them, and neither of them had spoken for a long moment after. "I did not mean to say that out loud," Sarah said at last, and she did not look at him when she said it. She looked at the moth. "You came for your wages. They are on the kitchen table. I owe you $8 for the last week." Ethan did not move his boot from the step. He did not move his hand from the post. He said, "Ma'am." "Please don't call me ma'am," Sarah said. "You have been on this place for weeks." Sarah then, "Yes." He was quiet a moment. He said, "I'll take the wages in the morning if that suits." She looked at him then. The lamp caught the side of his face, and she saw that his eyes were not looking away from her, which was a thing she had not expected. Most men, when a woman says a thing like she had said, look at their boots. "Why in the morning?" she said. "Because I'd like to fix the west gate before I go," he said. "It has been catching on the post since Monday. It'll be worse by winter if it is not straightened." "The west gate," she said. "Yes. You were leaving tonight." "I was. And now you are staying because of the gate." He took his hand off the post. He turned the hat once in his hands, and then he looked at her plainly. "I am staying one more day," he said. "For the gate." There it was. He had not answered what she had said. He had not spoken of it at all. He had only offered her one more day and named a reason that was not the reason, and Sarah Kincaid, standing on her porch in the September evening with the lamp beside her and the shawl the color of oatmeal across her shoulders, understood in that moment that she had lived among men who told the truth with their hands longer than she had lived among men who told it with their mouths, and she knew this one for what he was. "All right," she said. "One more day." He put his hat back on. He said, "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Ethan." She watched him walk across the yard to the bunkhouse, and she watched the door close behind him, and then she stood a long while on the porch with the moth and the lamp, and she did not go inside until the wick had burned down almost to the brass. Grief does not leave. It just learns to share the house with other things. The morning came in cold and clean. There had been frost on the meadow, the first hard frost of the season, and the grass crunched under Sarah's boots when she went out at 5:30 to the barn to milk the cow. Pilot came with her, his gray muzzle low to the ground, his tail moving once when the barn door opened. She milked with her forehead against the cow's flank and her breath steaming in the lantern light, and she thought about what she had said and did not regret it, and she thought about what she had not said and did regret some of that. She had not told Ethan Calloway her age. She had not told him about the child that had not come. She had not told him that on the last morning of Thomas's life, Thomas had held her hand and said, "Sarah, do not stop," and she had said, "Stop what?" and Thomas had said, "Do not stop being who you are," and she had not understood him then and did not fully understand him now, though she understood him better than she had. She had not told Ethan about the letter that had come in July from Marcus Bell of Durango, 41 years old, a widower with 2 daughters and a good stone house on 3rd Street and a general store that did steady trade, who had written her 3 careful pages proposing that she might in the fullness of time consider becoming his wife. She had not answered the letter. She had folded it back into its envelope and put it into the drawer of the pine desk in the front room, beneath the Bible, and had not looked at it since. She had not told Ethan any of that. But she had told him she had forgotten what it felt like to be loved, and that, she thought, was in some ways all of the other things at once. By 6 o'clock the light had come up over the ridge and the frost was beginning to melt in patches where the sun struck. Sarah heard, from the direction of the west gate, the sound of a hammer. She stood in the yard with the milk pail and listened to it. 3 strikes. A pause. 3 strikes. A pause. It was not the sound of a man pounding out his anger. It was the sound of a man setting a nail true. "He is fixing the gate," she said to Pilot. Pilot looked at her. He did not answer, being a dog. By noon Ethan had straightened the west gate post, dug it out and reset it a full 8 inches deeper, tamped the new fill with the flat of a shovel, replaced 2 of the 4 hinges with fresh iron, tightened the 3rd, planed the drag on the bottom rail so the gate swung clean, and restrung the top wire of the fence for 30 feet on either side of the post because he had noticed while he was there that the wire had slackened over the summer. He came in for the noon meal with his sleeves rolled and his forearms streaked with the pale dust of the post hole, and he ate the biscuits and the beans and the black coffee at Sarah's kitchen table without speaking of the gate, and when the meal was done he said, "Thank you, Sarah," and went out again. At 2 o'clock she heard the hammer at the small barn. He was fixing the loose board on the east side. She had not asked him to. At 4 o'clock she heard him at the pump. The pump handle had been squeaking since June, stopped squeaking, and did not start again. At 5 o'clock, in the last of the sun, she went out to the west gate to see it. It swung open with a fingertip. It swung closed and settled into the notch with the small clean sound of a well-set door. She stood at the gate a long while with her hand on the top rail. The rail had been sanded smooth where a splinter had lived for 2 years. Thomas had meant to sand it. Thomas had not gotten to it. That is what love looks like when it doesn't announce itself. It just quietly faces the work, and does it, and does not ask to be thanked. That evening Ethan came to the porch again for his wages. Sarah met him at the door with the $8 in her hand and did not give it to him. "You said one more day," she said. "Yes." "You have fixed the gate and the barn board and the pump." "Yes." "And you were paid for through last week." "I was." "Then what do I owe you for today?" He was quiet. He said, "Nothing, Sarah. I stayed of my own account." She stood in the doorway with the $8 in her hand and looked at him. The lamp was not lit yet. The last of the sun was on his face. He looked tired around the eyes and calm in the mouth. "Will you stay tomorrow?" she said. She had not meant to ask it. She had meant to ask something else. "Yes," he said. "If you will have me, I will have you. Then I will stay tomorrow." He did not smile. She did not smile. But something in the porch between them turned a small quiet corner, and Pilate, who had been lying on the boards, sighed and put his chin down between his paws and closed his eyes. The next morning was a Saturday, which meant that by 10 o'clock the wagon of Mrs. Alma Whitfield came up the lane. Alma Whitfield was 57, a widow twice over, the postmistress of the Durango road station, and, as she was fond of saying, a woman who minded other people's business as a public service. She drove a gray mule named Absalom. She wore a black bombazine dress buttoned to the throat and a black bonnet with a gray ribbon, and she carried, as she always did on a Saturday morning, 3 letters, 1 packet of coffee, and a great deal of opinion. "Sarah," Alma said, from the seat of the wagon, "there is a man at your west gate with a plane in his hand." "Yes," Sarah said. "He is planing the top of the gate." "Yes." "You did not have a man at your west gate last Saturday." "I have had a man on the place since the last Tuesday of August, Alma." "I know when you got him, Sarah. I was the one who forwarded the letter from Pueblo. I am observing that last Saturday he was not at the west gate with a plane in his hand, and this Saturday he is. He is fixing the gate. He is doing more than fixing the gate." Sarah said, "Do you want your coffee inside, Alma, or on the porch?" "On the porch," Alma said. "The light is better for looking." They sat on the porch and Alma drank her coffee and watched Ethan at the west gate, and Sarah drank her coffee and did not watch him and did not need to. "He is a quiet one," Alma said. "Yes." "Thomas was a quiet one." "Yes." "Marcus Bell is not a quiet one." Sarah did not answer. "Marcus Bell writes long letters," Alma said. "I know because I forward them." "He has written you again, Sarah." "Came in yesterday. I have it in the wagon. I did not bring it up because I wanted first to see the man at your west gate." Sarah set her cup down on the porch board very carefully. "Alma," she said, "please bring me the letter." Alma brought her the letter. Sarah took it and did not open it. She set it on the porch board beside her cup. "Are you going to answer that one?" Alma said. "I do not know. You did not answer the last one." "No." "Marcus Bell is a good man, Sarah. He is a fair man. He is offering you what he considers to be in your best interest." Sarah looked at Alma. She said, "Alma, do you think it is in my best interest?" Alma Whitfield was quiet a long moment. She was a woman who minded other people's business, but she was also, in her way, an honest woman, and she was fond of Sarah Kincaid, whom she had known since Sarah was a girl in braids at the Durango schoolhouse. "I think," Alma said slowly, "that Marcus Bell would be kind to you. And I think that kindness is not the whole of what a woman may want at 34. And I think that the man at your west gate has planed the top rail so that it does not catch a woman's sleeve when she opens it, which is not the sort of thing a hired man notices, in my experience. A hired man mends the sag. He does not sand the splinter. There is a difference." Sarah did not speak. "I will drive on now," Alma said. "Absalom does not like to stand. Give my regards to your man at the gate." "He is not my man, Alma." "Not yet," Alma said and slapped the reins. And as she rolled out, she added over her shoulder, without turning her head, "The postmistress of Durango is a great many things, Sarah Kincaid, but she is not and has never been a liar." Sarah sat a long while on the porch with the letter beside her cup. Then she picked up the letter and went inside and put it in the pine desk with the first one, beneath the Bible, and did not open either of them. 2 miles down the road, Marcus Bell was in his store on 3rd Street in Durango, weighing out sugar for the widow Halloran, and thinking, as he did most Saturdays, about Sarah Kincaid. Marcus Bell was not a bad man. He was a careful man, a widowed man, a father to 2 small daughters, aged 7 and 9, both of them motherless since the spring of the year before, and he had written to Sarah because he had thought, with the flat correctness of a shopkeeper who has weighed many transactions, that she was 34, alone, capable, well-regarded, and would make his household a good wife and his daughters a good mother, and that he would in return be steady and provide and never raise his voice, which he considered, having grown up with a father who did raise his voice, to be a substantial offering. He was not wrong about any of this. He was only wrong in thinking that this was the whole of what Sarah Kincaid required. That afternoon, on the Kincaid porch, Ethan came in from the west gate for the noon meal, and when he sat down at the table Sarah said, "Ethan, tell me about your brother." He set his fork down. "His name was Caleb," he said. "He was 2 years younger than me. He was a hand at the 2-bar ranch up in Wyoming. He was thrown from a horse in June. A green colt he had been asked to gentle for a foreman who should have known better. Caleb had told me the horse was not ready. I had told him to be careful, and he had told me he always was, and he was, and it did not matter. He did not wake up after." "I am sorry," Sarah said. "Yes. Do you have other people?" "No, none." "None, Sarah. My mother was a laundress in Cheyenne. She went when I was 14. My father I do not remember. It was Caleb and me from the year I was 14, and after Caleb it has been the sorrel gelding and my own name, and that is all." She was quiet a long moment. She said, "Neither do I. My mother went when I was 19. My father went the year I married Thomas. Thomas went in March 2 years ago. There was to have been a child, but there was not." He did not say he was sorry. He said, "Thank you for telling me." She nodded. They ate the rest of the meal in the ordinary quiet of two people who had, without speaking of it, decided to know each other. The next weeks moved as the mountains moved, which is to say, without appearing to move at all until one day the light was different and the color of the aspens had gone from struck match yellow to the deep bronze of an old coin, and there was snow on the highest peaks though not yet on the meadows, and the air in the morning had the small hard edge of glass. Ethan worked. Sarah worked. He did not sleep in the house. He slept in the bunkhouse. He came in for the 2 meals and drank his coffee at the table and said thank you and went out again. He fixed the roof of the smokehouse. He mended a hole in the corral fence a heifer had put her shoulder through. He replaced the leather strap on the barn door hinge with a strip of well-oiled harness leather he had cut himself. He shod the bay mare June, and on the 3rd Tuesday of October, in a warm early afternoon when Sarah was in the kitchen putting up the last of the crabapple preserves, he built a new east-facing window in the front room where the old one had rotted, sanded the frame smooth, glazed it with a small pane of good glass he rode into Durango to buy with his own money, not with hers, and set it in place so that the morning sun would come through it and fall across the table where Sarah drank her coffee. When Sarah came down on the first morning it was set and saw the light on the table, she stood in the doorway a long moment with one hand on the jamb and did not speak. He built the window so that she would have good light in the mornings. He did not say so. He did not have to. That is what love looks like when it doesn't announce itself. It just quietly faces east. On the 15th of October, Marcus Bell rode out to the Kincaid place. He came in a black coat and a black hat and a clean white collar, and he tied his horse at the yard rail and took off his hat at the porch step and asked, with the flat correct courtesy of a shopkeeper, whether he might have a word with Mrs. Kincaid. Ethan was at the woodpile. He set down the axe. He did not come to the porch. He stood at the woodpile with his hand on the handle of the axe and he watched. Sarah came out to the porch and stood in her gray wool dress and her oatmeal shawl. "Marcus," she said. "Sarah," he said. He turned his hat in his hands. "I have written you twice. You have not answered." "No, I did not come to press you. I came because I did not want your silence to be misunderstood as an answer you had not decided to give. If it is an answer you have decided to give, I will accept it and I will not come again. If it is not, I will wait as long as you need." Sarah looked at him a long moment. She saw a good man in a black coat with a clean white collar and 2 small daughters at home who had lost their mother in the spring of the year before, and she felt for him the honest, level respect that one careful adult feels for another, and she felt no more than that, and she knew that no more than that would ever come. "Marcus," she said, "you are a good man. I will not have you wait for what will not come. My answer is no. It has been no since the first letter. I should have written you then and I did not, and that was my failing and I am sorry for it." Marcus Bell was quiet. He did not argue. He was not a man who argued. But he did not simply nod and go either. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was low but level, "I will accept what you have said. But I would like, if I may, to say one thing back, not to change your mind but so that when I ride out of this yard I ride out having said it. I did not write you because I thought you were alone and would be grateful. I wrote you because I have known you since you were a girl at the Durango schoolhouse, and because Thomas Kincaid was my friend, and because I thought, perhaps in error, that a promise made carefully might carry a life a long way. That is what I meant by fair. That is what I meant by best interest. I did not mean to weigh you like sugar on a scale, Sarah. If it sounded that way in the letter, that was my failing, and I am sorry for it. Sarah's throat tightened at that, because it was a true thing said cleanly, and truth said cleanly is never small. Marcus Bell did not weigh her like sugar. He never had. He was only a careful man with two small girls who had lost their mother, and he had been trying, in the language he had been given, to build something out of the pieces he had been left with. That was not a small thing. It only was not, in the end, her thing. Thank you, Marcus, she said. You did not sound that way. You have never sounded that way. The failing is not yours. He nodded once. Then he asked the last thing he had come to ask. May I ask, he said, if it is a matter of a particular circumstance or of me? It is not of you, Marcus. It is a particular circumstance. Yes. The man at the woodpile. Yes. He looked, for the first time, over her shoulder, out toward the woodpile. Ethan had not moved. Marcus Bell looked at him a long moment, and Ethan looked back, and neither of them spoke, and something passed between them that was not friendship and not enmity but the plain acknowledgement of two men who understood the same fact. He is a fortunate man, Marcus said at last. I hope he knows it. He knows it, Sarah said. Then I will not trouble you again, Sarah. I wish you well. I wish him well. Good day. Good day, Marcus. He put on his hat. He walked back to his horse. He mounted, and he did not look back, and he rode out the lane at an even trot, and that was the whole of it. He had come with dignity, and he had gone with dignity, and Sarah Kincaid watched him go and felt, at the bottom of her chest, the small clean ache of respect for a man who had asked a fair question and taken a hard answer without breaking. She turned. Ethan was still at the woodpile. She walked across the yard to him. She stopped at the fence line that ran between the yard proper and the woodlet, the low split-rail fence that Thomas had put in the second year they were married, and she stood on one side of it and Ethan stood on the other with the axe in his hand. Ethan, she said. Sarah, set down the axe. He set it down. I said a thing to you on this porch 4 weeks ago, and you did not answer it. I would like you to answer it now. He looked at her over the top rail of the fence. He looked at her a long moment. Then he took off his hat. Sarah, he said, you said you had forgotten what it feels like to be loved. I did not answer because I did not think it was mine to answer, 4 weeks ago. I have thought about it every day since. I think it is mine to answer now if you will have my answer. I will have it. Then I will spend as many days as you have left on this earth reminding you. I will not do it with speeches. I have not got the speeches in me. I will do it with the gate and the window and the pump and the roof of the smokehouse and the wood in the box by the stove. I will do it by being at the table in the morning and at the table at night and by not going. That is the answer I have. It is the only answer I have. Sarah Kincaid put her hand on the top rail of the fence. She said, that is the answer I wanted. Then I will stay, Sarah. Stay. He put his hat back on. He did not come around the fence. He stood on his side of the rail. She stood on hers. Pilot, at the porch, lifted his head and set it back down. The wind in the cottonwoods along the creek made its small dry sound. The east-facing window in the front room caught the last of the afternoon light and threw a small warm square onto the boards of the porch. Grief does not leave. It learns to share the house with other things. And sometimes, if a person is patient and if a person is fortunate, the other things learn to make a place for the grief, and the house grows large enough for both. They were married in the front room of the Kincaid house on the second Saturday in November, by a circuit preacher from Pueblo, with Alma Whitfield as witness and pilot on the boards by the door. Sarah wore the gray wool dress. She said she saw no reason to buy another. Ethan wore the canvas coat brushed clean. He said the same. Alma Whitfield cried, which she denied afterward and continued to deny for the rest of her natural life. The preacher pronounced them, and Ethan Calloway did not kiss his wife in front of the preacher, being a private man, but he took her hand in both of his, and he held it, and he did not let it go for a long moment, and Sarah, who had been told once by her mother that a woman knows a man by the way he holds her hand, knew her man. That evening, on the porch in the last of the November light, Sarah Kincaid, who was now Sarah Calloway, stood in her gray wool dress and her oatmeal shawl with the lamp beside her, and she looked at her husband, who had come up the porch step and set his hat on the peg by the door. "Ethan," she said. "Sarah, I have not forgotten what it feels like to be loved." He looked at her. He did not smile with his mouth. He smiled with his eyes, which is the way of a certain kind of man. "Good," he said. "And that, if you have been listening carefully, is the whole of the story. I want to tell you something, friend, before I go. If there is a person in your life who has said, in words or in the quiet of their doing, that they have forgotten what it feels like to be loved, I would ask you this. Do not answer them with a speech. Answer them with a gate. Answer them with a window. Answer them with a morning at their table and a night at their table and by not going. That is the answer that carries. That is the answer that stays. Love, in the end, is not the word. Love is the staying. And staying, when you look at it closely, is only a long chain of small ordinary days that a person did not walk out of. That is all it is. That is all it needs to be. Thank you for riding with me tonight. Thank you for the quiet hour of your evening. If this story has warmed the small part of you that needed warming, you will know it, and you will not need me to tell you so. Until next time, keep riding. And if you would sit one more evening by this fire with me, there is a story I have been carrying that I would like to tell you next. It is about a young widow on a homestead north of Pueblo, and a stranger who arrived at her gate in a January snow with a rifle across his back and a child on his saddle, and what she said to him at her door, and what he did not say back. That story is waiting for you on the next video. I will see you there.